Welcome in the latest episode of the What I Bet podcast on the Straight Outta Vegas AM podcast feed. You can find us wherever you get your podcast, Straight Outta Vegas Alpha Mary AM. Also on Pregame now on Twitter. You can find me at the real underscore G Warner across all social media platforms. Tonight's episode, we're going through the World Cup on June 25th. Also, the Major League Baseball card. Try to get you some ready for some big matchups in the third match day of the World Cup. Getting ready to really qualify everyone for the knockout rounds. Of course, a Thursday getaway day in Major League Baseball. This is episode 54. Thanks for making it through this long of the podcast. Appreciate the support, especially because I've been dying for the last 2 weeks pretty much from E. coli, of all things. Thank you to the mango on the street in Mexico City. Let's get into it. We'll have a best bet coming end of show. Also, a way to save you some money at pregame.com. Thanks for hanging out. And let's start in the World Cup with Curacao. They're currently a 2.25 goal underdog right now. They are facing the Ivory Coast. Curacao on 1 point, Ivory Coast on three after beating Ecuador, and then unfortunately falling in a incredible collapse against Germany, leading 1-0 till late in the match. We're drawing 1-1, and then unfortunately tried to play an offside trap, I guess you could say, and of course did not actually make it happen. And that ended up leading to a late goal for Germany to win a match. It did cover the +1.25, but ultimately was half a bet winner instead of a full bet winner. Anyway, Curacao on 1 point, they are I think they're eliminated. I guess they're not eliminated necessarily because a win would put them on 4 points, which is pretty much the magic number, it seems, especially after a bunch of match day three results on Wednesday, the 24th of June. We'll get to those in a second, or maybe we just won't talk about them because there's some awful beats on Czechia, ultimately in the Mexico late goal in stoppage time. My sixth stoppage time loss this entire match day. I guess just match day three just started today. Five through the first two, one already on match day three, hoping to leave those behind in the past because that seems to be the most punishing, especially turning a winning day to a losing one. With that said, Curacao 2.25 goals to Ivory Coast. Total is 3.25. In terms of where this number was, so before the tournament started, match day one, before kickoff of anything, Curacao was a 1.25 goal underdog and a 2.75 total. That's climbed to 3.25. It's climbed from 1.25 all the way to 1.5 before kickoff of match day one up to 2.25. So clearly no belief in Curacao. I think that's expected based on the weaker teams not really able to perform at this level. But Curaçao's been good. I mean, the goalless draw with Ecuador certainly gives them a chance to potentially move through, and honestly made me have a lot of faith in their defense, especially after getting mowed down by Germany. But they did equalize, so that was pretty impressive. With all that said, Ivory Coast, we'll see how they recover really from a really debilitating loss to Germany, which, I mean, they were going to win the group essentially on 6 points, then went from 6 points to 4 points to just 3 points, getting none out of the German match, which they deserved a lot more. And that's a big question about the Elephants. I mean, I think they have a great defense. The offense is a real question for me. So big favorite doesn't make a ton of sense. Lean to Curacao, and I think more strongly to under 3.25. The other matchup in that group is Ecuador and Germany. Ecuador on a single point as well. Germany on six after two wins. Germany's already clinched, probably rotating, and that's why we've seen a bunch of changes in this number. Ecuador were a 3/4 goal underdog. Initially, total was 2.5. We saw it reinstalled after match day two at 3/4 of a goal with a 2 3/4 total. So I guess not a huge change there. Actually, initially, that's our current number, excuse me, but it was a half of a goal. So we saw some Ecuador money coming in a lot because I think the speculation that Germany is going to rotate as they should. Problem is the German backups are about as strong as the Ecuador starters, is most likely. Ecuador, I thought, were really overvalued coming into this competition. A lot of the CONMEBOL teams from South America were, in my humble opinion. But I really like their setup here. Can lose this match, and you won't lose a full bet at the +1 at the +3/4 right now. Will a result which probably won't put them through unless it's a win. Will cover the spread. So I do like that +3/4 of the goal on Ecuador, probably more than I like the total, as I don't really want Ecuador to get in a scoring match, but they might have to, especially because they need a victory to have any chance at moving through. To the next set, that was at 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time start. We'll move now to the 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Times. We'll start with Sweden and Japan because that's the obviously got the most jeopardy. Sweden on 3 points after a big win against Tunisia, which I attended in Monterrey, part of why I got E. coli, I think. At least I think it was more of the Mexico City portion of the trip, but c'est la vie. Anyway, Sweden current, I guess, opened a half of a goal underdog with a lot of juice. It was climbing pretty much from there. So you could argue that the market was putting it at about a quarter goal underdog Sweden against Japan. Total is 2.25, juiced very heavily to over. Fast forward to current numbers, we have Sweden now a much more affordable half a goal underdog, total at 2.75. So we've seen that increase a lot, the total, and a little bit the side. I think a lot because there's extra faith in Japan to score goals, and I believe in them to do so. They're a really strong team, I think. Sweden at a half a goal underdog with two of the best strikers and probably the best strike combination in all of these World Cup games with Alexander Isak and Viktor Gyökeres. We'll see how they play together. Of course, it looked really good against Tunisia, but who hasn't looked good against Tunisia so far? But Sweden as a half a goal underdog is interesting, especially because there's questions about Japan scoring goals. That's my biggest interest. I think we could see some goals in this matchup, which does limit my interest in underdogs usually, but I think Sweden can certainly take an early lead, can score a bunch of goals. And I think the Swedish size might be a problem for Japan, who stole a point late against Netherlands, sending crosses into the box, and which didn't seem like it would ever work against a much taller Netherlands side. But Sweden should have the ability to at least expect that coming late. And I think Japan is a big favorite, at least requiring a win, is asking a lot out of them. Next matchup in this same group is Tunisia on 0 points. They're already eliminated. The Netherlands on six after beating Sweden, or excuse me, on 4 points after beating Sweden and tying Japan. So there's a lot of jeopardy here still. Tunisia playing for pride. I don't think they sacked their second manager of the tournament, but they're were initially a one goal underdog with a total at 2.5. Well, fast forward to today, and the spread is 2.5 goals. So basically, they're getting the entire total, aka big increase on what expected from Netherlands to score. Also on Tunisia, I guess, little faith in them. The total now is 3.25. So we've seen pretty big increases in both of those. Tunisia is certainly at some point they do have some value. I thought they might have actually, and that's second match day meeting with Japan, but things did not go well in that matchup as well. I don't know what it would take to back Tunisia at this point. 2.5 feels like a lot of value. But if you like Tunisia, you might want to see a low scoring game. The problem is, I don't know that I can really trust them to play a ton of defense. And the Netherlands, they don't really have a great strong defense as their Netherlands football Twitter page is the most popular one out there, a fan site really, but I think covers the team pretty well. I was rereading some of their expectations or I guess recaps of match they won, seeing some of the tweets that were sent out live and saying, oh, the Netherlands, Ronald Koeman, their manager, substituting all their attackers for defensive players because that's what we're really good at. So there's not a lot of belief in the Netherlands defense, and I think that probably points to some problems coming down the stretch. To the last two sets of matches in the United States of America's group, we have Australia and Paraguay. Currently, Australia on 3 points after beating Turkey. Paraguay on 3 points after beating Turkey. So this is a big matchup to see who can potentially move through. A draw will be great news for both of them. Potentially, I think getting a third place position. You could argue that you might see a little bit of collusion there, though you never see that in any sort of soccer competition. With that said, Australia were a quarter goal underdog when headlines came out, and I think Paraguay had a lot more respect in the marketplace. Total was 2.25 in that matchup. Now we've fallen from 2.25 down below through two, all the way to 1.75. A lot of juice to over. Total was right there. Australia as a side, quarter goal underdogs with a ton of juice. I think we're falling, and pretty much market is now offering Australia as a pick 'em, but the underdog side of that. Australia to me, I mean, didn't do anything against the US, but were physical, took a lot of yellow cards early, and at least were playing defense. Early own goal was certainly not great for them, but the under ended up hitting, so we appreciate that. From a Paraguay's perspective, I mean, they fell down to 10 men, but still defended like crazy. Were great against a Turkey team that just hasn't shown any ability to score goals. And that's a big problem for them, of course, on 0 points and embarrassment, probably biggest underachievers of this entire World Cup. Well, sticking to Australia and Paraguay, I just don't see a lot of goals here. I'm waiting to see a two come back as a total. I'll certainly play that if that's available, even a juice number there. I just don't play totals below two. That's the lowest key number that I'll get involved. Last matchup that we'll cover from the World Cup for this episode before we turn to Major League Baseball, the United States of America were initially a pick 'em with more juice to Turkey, total at 2.5, juice very heavily to under. Well, fast forward now, Turkey are a half a goal underdog. The total is 2.75, and we know the United States are going to rotate. We saw it with Mexico in Wednesday's action. They rotated a lot, did nothing for an entire half, and then really caught Czechia on a counterattack. I don't even think Czechia was really throwing everything forward at that point. Still pretty early, 55 minutes, and the first Mexican goal went in. But a center back was out of position, probably trying to chase a lost cause, and that's the biggest question about the United States. I think going into the competition, I believed in the United States defense a lot. I felt it was far ahead of their offense. They scored a bunch of goals against Paraguay and then got an early own goal from Australia. That was huge. I guess got an early own goal against Paraguay as well. And really, the first goal, when it scored, that's a big indicator of where things will go. But for me, I still think Turkey have two of the most talented players in this matchup, especially if Christian Pulisic doesn't start or doesn't even play. Not sure about his availability. Missed match day two. I would expect that if he's anywhere near healthy, they'll try to get him some minutes and probably start him and then take him off relatively early, or maybe let him play the last 30 minutes or something just to get his legs going. Because I mean, everything turns up from the end of the match day of the group stage, which is the next match will literally come up in a few days. With that said, total, I mean, you got to lean under with Turkey at this point, with under 2 3/4. It's climbed a quarter of a goal or more like a half since initial numbers came out, and they haven't scored a goal this tournament, haven't earned a point either. The United States probably will try to control the ball and will ultimately go forward and try to score goals because they don't have any sort of jeopardy in this matchup. You could argue that's great for them because they won't have any pressure or stress. But there are some players out there that are trying to make a name for themselves and find some playing time in the eventual knockout rounds. But from Turkey's perspective, I mean, the value is certainly on Turkey, half of a goal underdogs. It's just, can you stomach playing them when they're certainly afraid, I think, of going back to Turkey after a really great Champions League season. A lot of their bigger clubs filled with Turkish players were great in the club season, but they have fallen flat on their face again. I think a lot due to management, but also not being able to find any sort of striker up top to score goals. So lean Turkey, I guess, strongest interest in that one, half goal underdog. Can get a result, cover the spread with a draw or a victory. United States certainly will want to win. We'll have a crowd behind them, but I just don't know how much the U.S. is really going to have because they're pretty much resting all yellow carded players because there's no sense in taking the chance that they might get suspended from the first knockout match. Now move to the Major League Baseball portion of the show. I did see lines earlier, so unfortunately I did that a little bit earlier as I forgot my charger at another house, and unfortunately I am running off of cell phone chargers on on iPads, yes, and also on MacBooks, which is never really a good scenario. So let's move before we get to the ultimate best bet coming end of show, of course, the what I bet best bet, and also the way to save you some money at pregame.com. But the Major League Baseball schedule, let's go to Seth Lugo and the Kansas City Royals, who are crushing the ball the first two matchups in Tampa this series, and really fell kind of flat in their face. Got two runners on first two innings with no outs, didn't do anything with it, and then unfortunately things went haywire for them. But the Rays, they're starting a bullpen game. It looked like Ian Seymour was starting initially, then it turned and all of a sudden became another starting pitcher who I lost a second ago, but we got it back. That was Casey Legumina. Right now, the Royals are plus 127 underdog. Total is 8. She's very heavily to over. Leading to Seth Lugo, he did take a line draw off of his forehead a couple starts ago, but he's one of the most trustworthy starters that are out there. Also lean under. Kansas City seemed to slow down or cool off really quickly on Wednesday night. But at this point, it looks like Jack Caglione, I mean, two runners on, nobody out first inning. Had 6 home runs in the last 5 games. So it was perfect position to take a big early lead and stake Noah Cameron out to a quick advantage. But didn't happen, and we'll see what happens, especially when early start, 11:10 Central Time, 12:10 Eastern Time, first pitch. Could see a very quick getaway day game there in Tampa. Next, we'll go to that was just Kansas City. We'll move to Seattle, visiting Pittsburgh. We have Bryce Miller at Bubba Chandler. Also incredible on Wednesday night's game with Brian Wu with a no-hitter going, and then all of a sudden gave up 5 runs in the fourth inning. That juxtaposition is honestly incredible. But from a line on this one, Bubba Chandler, a plus 129 home underdog, which just reflects his inability to control the baseball. Huge prospect. Bryce Miller's been really good ever since coming off the injured list, getting his season started late. Actually won the job, I think, over Luis Castillo. Total in this one's 8.5, juice minus 110 both ways. I'm not a road favorite player, so the only way I could look is Pittsburgh. Big question though, and honestly, it hurts totals as well because if you can't throw strikes, then I can't back you. So I think I probably skip that one and move to the next. Go to the Athletics and the San Francisco Giants. We got Jeffrey Springs at Landon Roop. Currently, Roop minus 130 favorite. Plus 118 coming back on the Athletics. Totals 8.5, juice minus 125 to over. Expects a lot of runs being scored in San Francisco. Yes, during the day, it's a lot easier to see the ball carry there. That helps an athletics lineup that relies on slug. And I don't really believe in either of these bullpens, but it feels like a big total. I think big interest for me is under 8.5 in that matchup and potentially the plus money fading Landon Roop as I feel like he's gotten too much respect this season. The Houston Astros then visit Detroit Tigers. Tigers coming off a series of the New York Yankees and some injury concerns with Tarek Skubal on Wednesday night, but ultimately, this is a big series for the Detroit Tigers to stay or remain or get themselves back into the playoff race in the AL. Good thing everyone's under 500 in that entire league, it seems. But Imai starting for the Astros plus 106 underdog on the road at Trey Melton plus, or excuse me, minus 117. Totals 8.5, she's minus 120 to over. My biggest interest is on Trey Melton as a short home favorite. I'm just not a really believer in the Astros. Yes, their bullpen looks a lot better with the return of Josh Hader, but with Jeremy Pena's iffy hamstring was out of the lineup on Wednesday. Excuse me, on Tuesday, I think it was. But that's a big question for me. And the Tigers eventually going to round into form. I trust AJ Hinch, so I'll lean to that minus 117. We'll next move the Philadelphia Phillies and Cristopher Sánchez on the road at Cade Cavalli of the Washington Nationals. Sanchez a minus 180 favorite, which is enormous. Plus 162 coming back in the Nats. Total is 8, minus 120 to over. And the big question is if you don't believe in Cristopher Sánchez or think he has a bad day, play the Nationals plus 162 and over 120, over 8 minus 120. I just am pretty scared of Christopher Sanchez, even though the Nats can hit anybody, it seems, but honestly, their best hitters are left-handed, so that's also a problem against Sanchez. The Texas Rangers and MacKenzie Gore visit the Toronto Blue Jays and Kevin Gausman. Gausman, a minus 147 favorite, plus 133 coming back on Texas. Totals 8, juice minus 118 to under. The Rangers have been all over the place. They've gotten a lot healthier with Corey Seager coming back and Wyatt Langford and the rest, but have had some really poor showings. We're in Miami for a series this week and had one good performance and then didn't look great other than that. Had to travel up to Toronto while Toronto was playing at home. I think the big number is the most interesting thing. Kevin Gausman has been very inconsistent lately, so minus 147 seems too large. So give me MacKenzie Gore plus 133. We'll next move the Chicago Cubs and Matthew Boyd coming off the IL at the New York Mets and Freddie Peralta after a doubleheader on Wednesday. Good question about who's going to be available for this one. Boyd plus 100, even money, underdog on the road, totals 8.5, minus 110 both ways. I'll lean to Peralta, though he's been really scuffling as of late. We'll next go to the New York Yankees, Cam Schlittler on the road to the Boston Red Sox, and Connolly early plus 139 underdog, totals 8, minus 125 to under. Hard to fade the Yankees right now, but their lineup is nowhere near what it is with a healthy Aaron Judge in the lineup. Schlittler's been awesome. Probably under 8's my biggest interest, though I don't really like unders in Fenway Park. Last but not least, the Arizona Diamondbacks visit the St. Louis Cardinals. We got Zac Gallen at Michael McGreevy. McGreevy minus 125 home favorite, plus 113 on the D-backs. Total is 9. Juice minus 105 to over, minus 115 to under. The cards to me are the way I'd want to go here. I'm fading Zac Gallen until I can't do it anymore. His curveball probably be good in the humidity in St. Louis, and he needs that, but he's been pitching to a ton of contact. And honestly, I don't know what happened to his right arm because he seems pretty healthy, but is nowhere near as effective as he was in the past, leading the St. Louis Cardinals minus 125. Now, before we get to the ultimate best bet portion of the show, the What I Bet Best Bet coming end of show, let's save you some money at pregame.com. Use the promo code HIT15. H is Hotel, I is in India, T is in Tango, 15, go $15 off anything at the pregame.com website, including my picks the rest of the week. The World Cup package for the 25th of June. Also, the rest of the World Cups out there. Of course, monthly weekenders, all those sort of things. Plenty of your other favorite handicappers at pregame.com. Also available on the site, pregame.com. Throw in HIT15 to save $15 and support the podcast. As for the What I Bet Best Bet, we were losers on our last episode of Kansas City under 8, and that was on Tuesday, June 23rd. We had two in a row on Kansas City games before that, so 2-1 last 3. But for the What I Bet Best Bet in this episode, let us go with the Detroit Tigers minus 117 at home to a up and coming, I guess you could say, at Houston Astros team. But I believe in Trey Melton. I believe in the Tigers. I'll take them at home minus 116 actually at Bet Online currently. Three, two, one. Hey, it's the real underscore G Warner. This is the What I Bet Best Bet on the Straight Outta Vegas AM podcast feed. You can find us on wherever you get your podcast, Straight Outta Vegas AM, also on Pregame Now on Twitter. You can find me at the real underscore G Warner across all social media platforms. For the best bet, the What I Bet Best Bet, we're 2-1 last three. Loser, unfortunately, on Tuesday night with the under in Tampa Bay. But let's go with the Detroit Tigers, Trey Melton minus 116 at home to the Houston Astros. I'm a believer in Detroit staying home after a tough Yankee series, but one that they at least get to stay home for. Houston's on the road in Toronto. Now have to turn over to Detroit. Not a long trip, but it is another series away from home, away from their families, away from the routine. Take the Detroit Tigers minus 116 as they try to fight to get back into the American League playoff race.